Hey, welcome to my Halloween video. That may or may not be my actual Halloween video. It depends on when I finish the real one. I don't fucking know. So imagine for a second your name is J.J. Abrams. That stands for J. Jonah Jababramson. You make this little one-off found footage monster movie in 2008 called Cloverfield. It's an instant cult classic and people fucking love it. 8 years later, you decide, hey, let's expand the universe, but you know, I'm not quite sure how I want to do this, you know? Well, you got these scripts here for a bunch of unrelated movies. So let's just connect them. Hey everybody, it's me, MattCMG, and recently I watched all of the Cloverfield movies for the very first time, and by recently, I mean like 6 months ago, because I take forever to make videos. I've never really been all that into horror or monster movies or anything like that, but I remember hearing about the ARG, that's alternate reality game, associated with the first Cloverfield movie, and needless to say, I was intrigued. Back in 2008, the idea of a viral marketing campaign of this magnitude was kind of unheard of, which I think is why Cloverfield was so cool and why it was so successful, because you had a good movie on its own, and then there's this like additional lore that you could also look into for like the full experience to kind of make sense of the entire universe that they created, and they did it in a way where you felt special finding it and finding new information. It seemed for a while that Cloverfield was a one-hit wonder. That was until 2016 with the release of 10 Cloverfield Lane, which continued on the ARG from the first movie, and again 2 years later with the stealth job of the Cloverfield Paradox in 2018. Of course, I'm quite late to this topic because, of course, I'm never early for anything. Hint, hint, ladies. That was a fucking sexual reference. The joke is that I don't fast. I've always kind of been intrigued by this idea of cinematic universes that are only vaguely connected, so today, much like we did with the Schneiderverse for the Nickelodeon shows, we're going to be doing the same for the Cloverfield movies. We're going to be going through the lore of the viral marketing campaign, how that connects to the three movies, and exploring some alternate theories for how all three movies are connected. Without any further ado, smash that motherfucking like button, let's get weird, let's get wild, and join me as we delve into the Cloververse. Starting off, one of the most important things that you'll need to know in regards to the Cloververse is the lore of the viral marketing campaign. At least the original viral marketing campaign. This ARG spans multiple websites over a period of months, and there's a ton of secret lore to delve into. There is so much lore that I couldn't possibly mention all of it in one video and not make things confusing, so I'll give you all the important details, the relevant information if you will, and you can look into it further if you so desire. There are plenty of videos out there that compile every tiny detail of the ARG into one kind of cohesive video. This video is not one of them. And this may get a little bit confusing because this is just a little bit complicated regardless. It's just a very complicated topic inherently, but bear with me here. Our story begins with Tagruato, a fictional company set in the Cloververse that primarily deals with deep sea mining. But they also have several subsidiary companies in Bold Futura, Yoshida Medical Research, Slusho, and Parafunnel Wax Distributors. Keep these companies in mind as they will be relevant later in the video. Not these two. These two don't do anything. These two are important. At first, Tagruato seems just like your typical everyday multinational conglomerate, but there's more to them than meets the eye. Enter Tidal Wave, an eco-terrorist organization that doesn't take too kindly to Tagruato's deep-sea mining ventures. And oh, how right they were. A member of this organization named Teddy Hansen goes undercover at Tagruato's Chuai drilling station in the Atlantic Ocean, alongside a Tagruato employee known as the Whistleblower. Together, the two find out that Tagruato is not mining oil at this facility, but rather something called seabed's nectar, the main ingredient in Slusho beverages. My hair is pissing me off. Together, Teddy Hansen and the Whistleblower attempt to reveal to the world what Tagruato is actually doing, and to do that, they send clues and information to Teddy's girlfriend, Jamie. This is all revealed in a series of videos on JamieandTeddy.com, which is another website set in the Cloververse and part of this ARG. In these videos, we find out that Teddy has discovered something that he wasn't supposed to find, and has been detained by Tagruato, but he managed to send Jamie instructions on what to do and a sample of the seabed's nectar, which he also instructs her not to eat. As you might have expected, she did not listen. She ignores his very cryptic instructions and just assumes that he's trying to break up with her, and she eats the room temperature seabed's nectar and proceeds to act like a fucking crazy person. This video heavily implies that the seabed's nectar has strange properties that can cause different things to happen to you depending on how you consume it. If you consume it frozen in slushy form, then it brings you immense euphoria, but if you consume it raw at room temperature, you might go utterly fucking insane. Put a pin in all of this seabed's nectar slusho stuff, because we're gonna come back to it. It's important. Flash forward to December 26th, 2007, and the aforementioned Chuai drilling station is destroyed. Tagruato blames the destruction of the station on Tidal Wave, but I think we all know who's really responsible. Listen closely to this clip, if you will.
But what caused the shower of debris that followed remains.
Sound familiar? It's pretty obvious that it was our good boy Clover, or Clovey, I'm gonna call him Clover because Clover is better, who destroyed the Chuai station. But that begs the question, Why? Well, you know, aside from the fact that it's a giant hulking monster, what actually caused Clover to attack the station? Well, according to J.J. Abrams, that stands for Jar Jar Binkstroms, Clover is just a baby and has been hibernating for hundreds or even thousands of years. And what happens when you wake up a napping baby? They have a fucking tantrum. And that's exactly what happened with Clover. The Chuai station was built on top of Clover in order to harvest the seabed's nectar from it, and in the process, they woke him up, causing him to attack, starting with the station. The destruction of this station likely resulted in the death of Teddy Hansen, so his sister Elise, or Alice, I don't know how you fucking pronounce it, spelled that way, goes looking for clues as to where he is or what happened to him. In the process, she discovers photos taken by Tagarado that shows Clover and the parasites at the bottom of the ocean, meaning that they did, in fact, disturb Clover, or at the very least were aware of him. Again, like I mentioned, I'm leaving out a ton of stuff from this ARG which you can all check out for yourselves, but by this point we get into the events of Cloverfield, the original 2008 movie. Clover attacks New York City, shit hits the fan. But what's interesting about the movie is that there's a ton of stuff in it that references the events of the ARG and some other things that kind of tie everything together that you would not have known otherwise. For starters, remember Slusho? Of course you remember Slusho. I mentioned it like a minute ago, you fool, you idiot, you fucking dolt. Well, Slusho is the company that Rob from the first movie works at, and it's his promotion within the company that prompted the going away party that we see at the start of the film. At the party, there's a brief shot of Jamie from the ARG sleeping on the couch, and when Clover first attacks, the first thing he destroys is a Tagarado cargo ship. How's that for irony? Later in the film, we see the parasites from the underwater photo jump off of Clover and start attacking people in the streets. And later, they end up biting Marlena in the subway. Whatever these parasites were packing, it got into her bloodstream and she fucking explodes. This brings us back to the seabed's nectar. One of the Slusho ads that you'll stumble upon during the ARG shows a very enthusiastic Japanese man being very excited about the fact that he has Slusho in his stomach, in his little tum-tum. And the stomach is very heavily featured in the ad. Now I might be looking into it a little bit too much, but it seems like this was foreshadowing to what the seabed's nectar can do to people in high doses, and it also explains the origins of the nectar. When the parasite bites Marlena, she explodes from the stomach, meaning that there's a correlation between the seabed's nectar and the stomach, as hinted at in the commercial. When Tagarado set up the mining station to harvest the nectar, they make it seem like it was Clover who produced it, but from what we know previously, it seems like it's the parasites who live on his back that are the producers, and the fact that they bite Clover all day probably gives him high doses of the substance as well. The parasites produce the rawest form of the seabed's nectar, and thereby the most dangerous, hence why this chick went full inflation fetish on us. I'm a scientist, by the way, this is totally accurate, that's definitely how that works. Then we get into 10 Cloverfield Lane, which continued the ARG from the first movie. It goes pretty deep as well, but there's really only one major piece of information that's really relevant to tying together the Cloververse as a whole. If you remember back near the start of the video, you'll remember that Tagarado has several subsidiary companies. One of these companies is Bold Futura, a company that deals with highly advanced technology. If you were to go to the employees section of their website, you'd find a man by the name of Howard Stambler working in the satellite division. And if that name sounds familiar, that's John Goodman's character from 10 Cloverfield Lane. Most of the ARG deals with Howard's personal life, with trying to get his daughter back and simping for his wife, and we really don't really care about that, so we'll be skipping over all that kind of stuff in that ARG. Go look into it if you're interested, though. What is important, however, is what Howard tells Michelle and Emmett about what he found when he was working with the Navy. He and his partner discovered some alien shit, gathered a whole bunch of evidence for it, and were subsequently discharged from the military. So to prepare for the invasion that he knew was coming, Howard built the bunker where the majority of the film takes place. However, that's about as far as the connections go for 10 Cloverfield Lane, as there really isn't much else that connects it to the first movie. The aliens at the end of the film have absolutely nothing to do with Clover or anything else that we already know of, so it's kind of fell flat in that regard, kind of a missed opportunity there. What is it? Somebody made a fan edit where they replaced the aliens at like the ending shot of the movie with like, you know, a silhouette of Clover when the lightning strikes. It's actually pretty fucking badass. Like it's fucking dope. I wish that was the actual ending. So let's move on to the Cloverfield paradox. As far as I know, the ARG for this movie didn't go very deep. However, it is still connected to the Cloververse via a few Easter eggs. Tagarado and Slusho make appearances, and of course the final shot of the movie shows what seems like an adult Cloverfield monster. This movie was the biggest fucking cock tease I've ever seen in my life for that scene and that scene alone. But now let's get into some theories for how these three movies are connected. The first we're going to talk about is my own headcanon, and the second is likely what's actually canon. In my headcanon, all three movies take place in the same universe and in the same timeline. In 2008, the events of Cloverfield happened with the attack on New York City and the military killing the monster and destroying the city in the process. After years of alien research, this event was likely what influenced Howard Stambler to come to work for Bold Futura in 2009 and to continue his satellite-related research into the A. Lamaux. The attack on New York is never mentioned in 10 Cloverfield Lane or in Paradox, but just because they aren't mentioned doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't happen. So in my headcanon, it did happen, it just isn't mentioned by anyone in any of the other films. And from what Howard says about his time working with the Navy, the government would likely want to keep the Cloverfield incident as covered up as humanly possible. I don't know how you would cover up New York just not existing anymore, but that's neither here nor there. 8 years after the events of Cloverfield, the events of 10 Cloverfield Lane happen, where aliens invade Earth, though their connection to the Cloverfield monster is unclear. Sometime after the events of 10 Cloverfield Lane, the aliens are defeated, and 12 years later, in the year 2028, humans use some of the alien technology that they found during the conflict to build a space station particle accelerator, leading to the events of the Cloverfield paradox. However, when they jump between universes, they cause problems with space-time, causing things to happen across the world, past, present, and future, bringing Clover into their universe to begin with, creating a time loop. Again, this is just my headcanon. It's not perfect. This is just what I want to be the case, but it's not actually the case. So let's get into the reality of the Cloververse. As cool as it would be for all of these movies to take place in the same universe, they simply don't, and we have the Cloverfield paradox to thank for that. Well, not really, since before the release of 10 Cloverfield Lane, it was also revealed to be its own separate universe, making the Cloverfield franchise this kind of multiverse anthology series in a way. The theory that most fans agree on for the true canon of the Cloververse goes like this. The events of the Cloverfield paradox cause some kind of ripple effect throughout the multiverse, sending things from one universe into another where they do not belong. This is hinted at the beginning of the movie, where a news broadcast is playing with a man named Mark Stambler, possibly related in some way to Howard Stambler, going on an Alex Jones conspiracy rant about how activating this particle accelerator could have a slew of unforeseen consequences.
This experiment could unleash chaos, the likes of which we have never seen. Monsters, demons, beasts from the sea.
It's kinda interesting how he mentions beasts from the sea. It's almost like that's an Easter egg or something. I don't know. It's this particular scene that more or less confirmed that when the crew jumped universes, they released monsters and aliens across space, time, and the multiverse, resulting in Clover in the Atlantic Ocean in 2008, the aliens from 10CL in 2016, and likely the adult Clover at the end of Paradox in 2028. We're gonna use their years to differentiate the universes, by the way, so don't get this confused with like that. This is a timeline. No, these are separate universes. The 2008 universe, you have the 2016 universe, the 2028 universe. J.J. Abrams, that's short for Jesus Jones, I'm J.J. Abrams, revealed that Clover from the first movie has been on Earth for thousands of years, but is not alien in origin. So it's likely that the events of Paradox sent an egg or an already hibernating baby Clover from one universe into the 2008 universe, but thousands of years in the past, and the same goes for the aliens in 10 Cloverfield Lane, just with the aliens being sent back only a few years from the events of the film, since we know Howard was already researching them by the time the film began. Perhaps the Clover that we see at the end of Paradox is somehow related to the one that we see in the original Cloverfield. Maybe it's like its mother or something, as this one is likely full grown while this one is definitely confirmed to be a baby. Maybe that's why it's going on a rampage, because its child got sent to a different fucking dimension. To simplify, the events of Paradox released monsters and aliens across space and time, resulting in a Cloverfield multiverse. It's the actual canon that makes me really wish that my headcanon or something more simple and streamlined were actually the case. Because not only is the multiverse theory confusing for casual viewers, it's simply just less cool. It would have been so unbelievably cool to know that Howard was inspired by the events of the first film to build his bunker, or how the war with the aliens from 10CL resulted in the energy shortage from Paradox, for example. Knowing that these are all separate universes and that the only thing connecting them is the name makes it significantly less cool. The reason for why this is the case is because J.J. Abrams, that's short for J.J. Abrams, didn't actually plan for this to be a full-on cinematic universe. In fact, 10 Cloverfield Lane and the Cloverfield Paradox were originally spec scripts that were completely unrelated to Cloverfield, called The Bunker and The God Particle respectively, but Abrams changed them slightly and gave them the Cloverfield name for marketing purposes, but never actually thought about how they would connect in a greater cinematic universe, so he just kind of used the old multiverse excuse to make it an anthology series. There have supposedly been more Cloverfield films in the works, but it doesn't seem like we're gonna get another entry anytime soon, which is a shame since they could totally have one movie that kind of just fixes and simplifies the canon while also having a much bigger audience for a new viral marketing campaign, since the internet is way bigger now than it was back when the first movie released. It doesn't seem like that's gonna happen though, considering a lot of the sites from the old marketing campaigns no longer work unless you use the Wayback Machine, and given the fact that Cloverfield Paradox was not received very well by critics and fans alike. It all kind of makes me think that they've given up on the Cloverfield franchise. Abrams has said in interviews that he wants to do a true sequel to Cloverfield, and I genuinely hope that that happens, as after watching the films, looking into the ARGs, and doing research for this video, I've come to truly enjoy the franchise. I just hope it stops suffering from poor planning. The Cloververse fandom is truly dedicated to the franchise, with tons of theory videos, fan films, and all kinds of stuff that shows how much potential this franchise actually has, to the point where Clover could become like the American Godzilla. Not American Godzilla, But like what Cloverfield is to America, Godzilla is to Japan. You guys know what I mean, fuck you. But that's all I have to say regarding the Cloververse. Let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know if there's any other cinematic universes you want me to take a look at in the future. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe for more semi-comedic bullshit like this. I've been MattCMG, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Hello. Hello, I have cock cancer. I have cancer on my cock. I'm British, I have cancer on my cock. I have cock and ball cancer. I have dick disease.